All right, Leif, you were, for those of you that don't know, Leif was a ship driver for how many years? So Leif went to the Naval Academy, didn't get picked up for SEAL teams right out, or didn't get picked up for BUDS right out of the Naval Academy, so he had to go to a ship. Here's a question not about that specifically, but Leif, what are your thoughts on a ship's captain being relieved of command and what to do if you are involved? And he would like to know from the ship's captain's perspective that is being relieved because of the mistakes of your crew, or if you're in the crew and the captain's getting relieved even though you made the mistakes. What are your perspectives on that?
Well, look, just to give people some background on that, I know I've talked about my background on podcast 11, but it was, I never wanted to be a ship driver. I wanted to be a SEAL. That's why I went to the Naval Academy. I got thrust in that position. Looking back on it, it was an amazing opportunity for me as a young man to have to be in those leadership positions, and I enjoyed my time on the ship.
How much does a warship cost to build?
Billions.
A couple billion dollars.
It's crazy.
So you're sometimes you're the guy, right? You're a Lieutenant JG on the bridge of a $2 billion ship, and you're in charge of all.
Yeah,
that
and when you're the officer of the deck, like you're the guy in charge. The captain's asleep,
right,
in his cabin, and he's got full faith and trust in you, and you're running the ship.
And so there's the question right there. Sometimes the captain's asleep in the cabin, and he runs, and the crew runs the ship aground. The captain gets fired. What do you think about that?
That is the Navy way. It's always been that way. And I think it's 100% correct because there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. And I think that if you have, even if the captain wasn't in direct responsibility, it's his job to train that team. Yep. It's his job to mentor that team. And if he's got questions about whether or not somebody has the capability to do that job, then they shouldn't be in that position. It's up to the captain. Now the captain can't be everywhere at once, so it's decentralized command. He has to rely on his leaders, but it's definitely. I think ultimately the captain is responsible, and that's really what extreme ownership is about.
I had a client ask me a question yesterday. Have you ever sent anyone to do something that they weren't ready to do? And I thought about it for a minute, and the first thought was, well, of course. The second thought was, no. The real answer is it's a gray area, right? Did I ever send somebody to do something that they weren't 100%? If I put this quantification on 100% ready for it?
All the time.
All the time. How often did I send somebody to do something that they weren't capable of doing? The answer is 0. In other words, if you weren't capable of doing this and I didn't trust that you could make it happen, I wasn't going to let you do it. That'd be irresponsible for me as a leader to let a subordinate go and do something that they're not ready to do. That's it, period. Or they're not 100% ready to do, or not 100%, but they're not capable of doing. But, I mean, when we first got to Ramadi, in your mind, you probably weren't 100% ready to go out there and execute.
Particularly because we've been training for a mission with just SEALs. You know, for roll-up assaults or direct action raids, at nighttime, and all of a sudden we're shifting to daytime counterinsurgency operations, working with Iraqi soldiers. Completely different mission.
Yeah,
broken up in all these different units. We hadn't trained like that
in a violent war zone, by the way. But I had trust that you were completely competent and capable of doing that. And if I didn't think that, and I didn't think you were competent, or I didn't think you were capable, then I would be a bad leader if I said, yeah, go ahead and go do that. And then I answered the question further to this client. I said there was 2 people from Task Unit Bruiser that didn't go on deployment with us because they weren't capable of doing that job. So yes, you as a leader, you're responsible. And I was thinking about this. There's been times where Navy ships have run aground and the captain wasn't even on board. He had flown to somewhere to go do a meeting somewhere. The ship runs aground. Guess what? Still getting fired. Because you left someone in charge, you left that team, you didn't train them well enough, and you can make all the excuses you want. I wasn't there. Yeah, well, guess what? You're still getting fired because you were responsible for that team. So
I think part of that, too, is the understanding, what no bad teams, only bad leaders, with the chapter 2 we wrote, in Extreme Ownership, is about the part of that is I have seen some people that misinterpret that, right? To say, well, I got a bad leader, so the team's not good. That's not an excuse.
Oh.
So when we're talking about leadership, we're talking about leaders at every level of the organization. So if you're a department head on that ship, or a division officer, or a division chief, and you say, oh, I got a bad commanding officer. It's all the commanding officer's fault. Our ship doesn't perform the way it should. Whatever your team is, That's not an excuse. You got to do your utmost to get your team ready, to train others around you, and lead that team as much as you possibly can. You don't have to be the senior guy in charge. And often some of the best units we worked with and we're part of, the senior guy may not have been the guy driving the operations, but he allowed his leaders to go out and execute and make it happen. So leadership, we're talking leaders at every level of the organization. It's not an excuse to put the blame on the boss. You got to step up, you got to lead, and own your team, solve problems, get better, learn from mistakes, and make it happen.
What does it mean when a ship runs aground?
I mean, it literally hits dirt.
Oh, straight
That's
up.
what it means.
Oh, all right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, we're talking ship collisions.
Yeah,
this is so running aground is one thing. And there is an argument to be said, like, because some of our greatest leaders, like Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, who was the hero of the Pacific War, I've quoted him, on this podcast previously. He was the commander in chief of all U.S. forces in the Pacific. So he was the person responsible for the entire war effort against the Japanese in World War II and that victory. A massive effort, obviously, and an extraordinary turnaround from disaster to a victory. He actually ran a ship aground as a junior officer. So there's an argument to be made that there is no the flawless performance. It doesn't exist, and people make mistakes. You can learn from it. As far as ships running aground, that's one thing. I think you can make a careful evaluation. What we're talking about here is specifically said ship collisions.
Oh yeah,
and those should not happen. That should not happen. I understand how easily that can happen because these are huge machines that go very fast, and you're out on the ocean with other ships that are moving around, and there's a whole lot of dangerous things.
And it takes some of those big ships takes miles to stop them. Mm. Like even if you see and you go, okay, hit all full brakes right now, it doesn't matter. You're still going to hit.
Absolutely.
You know you're going to get hit for like 10 minutes.
Yep.
You know you can't stop it. You just brace for impact.
Yeah, but if you got the right team in place, they know what they're doing. There's all kinds of safeguards in place, and if that team's properly trained, like that should not happen. It should not. It's like you should be able to. The airplane should land safely. All the horrible things that could go wrong when you're flying in an airplane and landing in a crazy airport like JFK or LAX.
Hong Kong. You're flown into Hong Kong.
Yeah,
that's a doozy too.
Yeah, so those kind of things that are crazy. So, but there's a lot of things that go wrong. But if it's done properly and safeguards are in place, you're gonna be fine. So. But it doesn't mean that we expect flawless performance, that no one's ever going to make mistakes. I think if a mistake isn't that bad, it should be forgiven. But there just isn't an excuse of like, well, it wasn't me, somebody else on my team did it. That's the opposite of extreme ownership. It doesn't work.
Doesn't work. Check.